Mrs. Chineye buried her husband with trembling hands and hollow eyes. The villagers whispered their condolences, but already she felt the sting of their curiosity. How could such a strong man die in his sleep? Her husband, Mr. Chizzy, had been robust, his laughter deep enough to fill the halls, his step so firm that the earth itself seemed to acknowledge him, and then gone. A sudden illness, the healer claimed. God's mysterious will, the priest intoned. Mrs. Chineye tried to believe it, until the third night after the burial. That was when her shadow betrayed her. She was sewing by candlelight when she noticed it. Her hands moved delicately, needle rising and falling through cloth, but her shadow remained still. The figure on the wall leaned back as if watching her, its head cocked at a sharp, unnatural angle. Chineye, the whisper slipped from the darkness, low and stretched like wind through a crypt. Her heart staggered in her chest. Who speaks? The shadow stretched taller, broader shoulders, forming where hers were narrow. Chizzy, her breath caught. No, you are gone. I am what remains, poisoned by my brother's hand. Tochukwu stole my breath. He covets what was mine, my lands, my blood, my children. And he will not stop. Mrs. Chineye shuddered. She remembered Tochukwu at the graveside, eyes glistening with sorrow, his hand gripping hers too tightly. The villagers praised him as dutiful king. To her children, he was an uncle who brought sweets and laughter. But the shadow insisted. It whispered every night, unraveling the mask Tochukwu wore. She saw it, slowly. The way his eyes lingered on her eldest son, as if measuring a legacy. The way his tone hardened when he spoke of my fields instead of Chizzy's fields. And then she found it, the jug of wine tucked beneath Tochukwu's cloak, its residue bitter on her tongue when she dared to taste a drop. The shadow was right. At the harvest feast, she stood pale as bone, clutching Chizzy's old goblet. Her voice cut through the music and laughter. I will drink from my husband's cup tonight, she said, and Tochukwu, my brother-in-law, shall drink with me. The hall fell silent. Tochukwu's hand froze. His smile faltered. His eyes darted too quickly, too knowingly toward the cask. The villagers saw it, saw his fear, his sweat, the trembling of his hand. They seized him before he could speak, dragging him into the night. By torchlight, the truth spilled from his lips: envy, greed, betrayal. Justice was done. The village praised Mrs. Chineye for her courage. Her children clung to her, safe once more, but the shadow did not fade. That night, she lit her candle, expecting release. Instead, the darkness stretched across the wall, taller than ever, looming, its head bent close. You saved them, it whispered, but you saved them for me. Mrs. Chineye's blood ran cold. You said you would leave when the truth was revealed. I said nothing of leaving. You carry me now. You gave me voice. You gave me strength. And I am not done. The shadow's fingers moved against the wall, long and sharp, tracing the outline of her children's door. Chizzy, she begged, voice breaking. Don't. A laugh rippled through the dark, low and hollow. I am not Chizzy. Chizzy is in the ground. I am what death left behind, and from that night forward, the widow lived with it. Her children slept safely for now, but every evening, as the candle burned low, the shadow stretched wider, darker, whispering hungers she dared not name. The widow's shadow had saved her family, but it had no intention of letting them go. The village celebrated Tochukwu's downfall. They called Mrs. Chineye brave, blessed, chosen by fate to unmask treachery. Gifts of bread and honey filled her cupboards. Neighbors smiled at her children in the streets, but Mrs. Chineye could not smile back. At night, the shadow stretched longer, blacker than before. By candlelight, it no longer resembled her at all. It stood like a man like Chizzy, and yet its eyes glowed empty, and its teeth gleamed when no light touched them. "You are stronger now," it told her. "You stood before them all, fearless. You tasted truth. Does it not burn sweet on your tongue?" She tried to resist, to blow out the candles early, but darkness did not banish it. It thrived there. Even by moonlight, she saw its outline on her walls, moving when she lay still, and it whispered, always whispering, "Do you know what Tochukwu planned for you? Chineye, he wanted your bed, your children's inheritance. Had I not warned you, he would have taken all. You owe me your life." She wept, silent, not daring to wake the children. On the seventh night, the shadow grew bolder. As she leaned over her daughter's crib, it stretched across the wall, its hand overlapping hers. Its fingers were long, too long, curling around the baby's shadowed throat. "No," Mrs. Chineye hissed, snatching her hand back. The shadow retreated, laughing softly. "Do not worry, little widow. I will not harm them. Not yet. They are mine as you are mine. We are one flesh, one shadow. You feel it, don't you? The hunger." And she did. She hated it, but she felt it. The gnawing ache to punish betrayal, to cut through lies, to taste fear in others' eyes. When the butcher's wife slighted her in the market, she saw herself pressing a knife into the woman's hand until it trembled. When the priest told her to pray for peace, she imagined black fingers curling around his throat. The hunger spread like rot. By the new moon, Mrs. Chineye no longer asked the shadow questions. She listened, she obeyed, and when he told her where to find the healer who had lied about Chizzy's death, she went, knife hidden in her sleeve. The healer's cottage sat on the edge of the village, where the marshland swallowed the road. A single lantern glowed in the window, pale against the swart of night. Mrs. Chineye's breath steamed in the cold, her steps muffled by the mud. Inside, her children slept, unaware that their mother walked alone with a knife hidden in her sleeve. The shadow guided her, tall and black upon the reeds. "He lied," it whispered. He saw the poison's mark in Chizzy's flesh and called it fever. He bent his knee to Arik. He let the rot take root. Her stomach twisted. Part of her prayed to turn back. Another part, the deeper, hungrier part, throbbed with anticipation. She pushed the door open. The healer, an old man with a crooked back, looked up from his ledger. "Widow Velan?" At this hour, her voice shook, though not with fear. "You looked upon my husband and told me he died of fever." The man's brow furrowed. It was lies. The shadow hissed through her lips. Mrs. Chineye's hand moved before thought could stop it. The knife slid free, flashing in the lantern light. The healer stumbled back, but age had weakened him. The blade found his chest, sank deep. His eyes widened, mouth opening in a soundless plea. Blood blossomed across his tunic, hot and wet against her hands. For a heartbeat, Mrs. Chineye froze. Horror gripped her. She had killed. She, a mother, a widow, had spilled blood. But then, the shadow laughed, and the laugh echoed in her chest. "Do you feel it?" it whispered, its shape towering across the wall, its teeth gleaming in the lamplight. The warmth, the release, the justice. Mrs. Chineye gasped, trembling, but she did feel it. The hunger eased, just a little. A warmth spread through her veins, dark and thrilling. The healer crumpled to the floor, his blood pooling fast, and in the glistening red, she thought she saw her shadow's reflection growing wider. By the time dawn broke, the village found the healer dead in his cottage, his ledger torn, his lantern extinguished. No one suspected Mrs. Chineye. They whispered of thieves, of wandering men from the marsh. Mrs. Chineye sat at her hearth, children still sleeping, her hands folded calmly in her lap, her shadow curled around her shoulders like a cloak. And for the first time since Chizzy's death, she smiled. The healer's death hushed the village. Fear crawled like frost through the streets. Neighbors barred their doors at night, muttering of thieves, of wolves, of curses from the marsh. Mrs. Chineye watched them all with calm eyes. The secrets pulsed warm in her chest, her knife, her hands, her shadow. Every evening, when the children slept, she lit a single candle. The shadow always came, taller, darker, teeth sharper, voice velvet against her skull. "You are mine, Chineye, and I am yours, but you are still soft, still fragile. We must make you more." She should have prayed, should have begged the gods for mercy, but instead, she leaned closer to the wall, whispering, "How?" The shadow's grin split wider. The changes began with her reflection. When she bathed in the stream, the water no longer showed her as she was. Her eyes gleamed black, her lips curled in a smile she didn't make. When she raised her hand, her reflection's fingers stretched longer, jointed wrong, tapering to points. At night, she felt it in her body. Her nails grew thicker, dark as iron. Her skin bruised easily, yet healed in hours. And sometimes, when she breathed, she swore she could taste the ash of the grave. Still, she craved more. The hunger returned, gnawing, demanding. The next to die was the priest. He had preached at Chizzy's burial that death was the Lord's will. The shadow showed her his hypocrisy, the gold hidden beneath his bed, the way he touched the altar as though claiming ownership of heaven itself. She found him in the chapel, whispering prayers to an empty room. He turned, startled, when she stepped from the dark. "Widow Velan," her voice was not her own. It was deeper, velvet edged with steel. "You buried my husband in lies." He lifted the cross, trembling. "God protect." Her hand snapped forward, faster than she'd ever moved. Fingers long, clawed, not fully has pierced his throat. His prayer drowned in his own blood. And when his body collapsed at her feet, Mrs. Chineye licked her fingers clean. It tasted like fire, like power, like belonging. By dawn, the chapel lay empty. The priest vanished as though swallowed by the night. The village feared devils in the woods. They never suspected the widow who walked among them. Her eyes darker, her smile too still. At home, her children clung to her, safe in her arms. She stroked their hair, humming softly, while her shadow loomed on the wall, taller, broader, horns calling from its head. "You are almost ready," it whispered. "Each life taking brings you closer. Soon, you will not need me. You will be me." Mrs. Chineye closed her eyes. For the first time, she did not feel grief, nor guilt, nor even fear. Only hunger. By winter's first frost, the villagers no longer spoke of thieves or wolves. They whispered of something else, something moving in the night, something that left no tracks but always found its prey. They nailed charms above their doors. They burnt sage in the fields. And still, people vanished. Mrs. Chineye walked among them by day, quiet and mild, the perfect widow. Her children clutched her skirts, their cheeks pink with cold. No one questioned her. No one looked too closely. But those who did noticed her eyes no longer reflected light. They seemed to drink it. Her voice was softer, too soft, each word slipping like silk into the ear. And when she smiled, there was always a shadow on her teeth, as though something darker hid behind them. The shadow had grown bolder too. It no longer waited for night. It stretched behind her even at noon, darker than the sun should allow. It flickered when she passed mirrors, never quite aligning with her steps. "You are close," it purred. "Your flesh bends, your soul loosens. Only one more breaking, Mrs. Chineye. Then we are one." She asked, her voice trembling with desire, not fear. "Whose blood?" The answer came with the village elder, a woman who had raised Chidi as though her own son. She had been the only one to look Mrs. Chineye in the eyes since the death began, suspicion sharp in her wrinkled face. "You walk too calm, child," the elder had whispered one evening. "Grief should break you. Instead, it fattens you." The shadow seated. She says she must be silenced. Mrs. Chineye waited until nightfall. The elder's hut smelled of herbs and smoke. The old woman slept lightly, but not lightly enough. Her eyes opened as Mrs. Chineye's shape filled the doorway. "Mrs. Chineye," the elder rasped, "what have you become?" The widow stepped forward, and the shadow rose with her, swelling until it covered the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Her hands stretched, fingers lengthening into talons, skin splitting into black veins. Her mouth widened, lips tearing, teeth jagged like the shadows. The elder tried to scream, but the sound choked in her throat as Mrs. Chineye's shadowed claws pierced her chest. Blood steamed in the cold air. Mrs. Chineye's shadow leaned in, merging with her flesh. The room went black. By dawn, there was no Mrs. Chineye as the village had known her. The woman who returned home wore the shape of a widow. Yes, but her movements were wrong, too smooth, too deliberate. Her shadow no longer lagged behind her. It walked beside her, with her, through her. Her children ran to her arms, laughing, unaware. She kissed their foreheads with bloodless lips. And when she smiled at the hurt, the smile did not end where her face ended. It stretched deeper into the dark corners of the house, teeth glimmering in the firelight. The widow's shadow no longer whispered, it no longer guided. It had become her. The village of Oba began to unravel. First, the healer, then the priest, then the elder. Each death cloaked in mystery, each body vanishing into whispers and silence. People muttered of curses, of restless spirits, of beasts from the marsh. Doors were bolted at dusk, prayers whispered over every candle flame, and still the widow smiled. Mrs. Chineye moved among them by day, shawl wrapped neat around her shoulders, her children clinging at her sides. Her eyes drank the light, her skin pale as frost, yet none dared speak their dread aloud. To accuse a widow, Chidi's widow, was to spit on grief itself. But they watched her. They saw her shadow. At noon, when the sun should have pinned it harmless to the ground, it stretched long, too long, slithering against walls, bending in ways her body did not. At night, it prowled ahead of her lantern instead of trailing behind, and when she stood still, sometimes it didn't. The children laughed, oblivious. Mama's shadow is funny, they chirped. The villagers did not laugh. One night, a mob gathered, torches, blades, trembling hands. They crept toward Mrs. Chineye's cottage, whispering prayers against evil. Inside, she heard them. The shadow heard them. They come for us. It hissed, teeth gleaming from the corners of the room. Shall we flee, Chineye, or shall we feast? Her lips curved. Feast. The mob broke through the door, righteous fury in their eyes, only to find the widow waiting in the center of the room, her children sleeping soundly behind her. Mrs. Chineye, the blacksmith thundered, "You are no widow. You are a curse upon us." She tilted her head, calm. A curse. And then she stepped forward. Her shadow peeled from her body like a living thing, a black tide pouring across the floor, climbing the walls, swallowing the torchlight. Faces paled, prayers faltered. The shadow opened its mouth, her mouth, and the sound that poured forth was not human. A scream stretched into eternity, a wail of hunger and grave dirt. The torches went out. The blacksmith swung his hammer blindly and felt it caught in a hand too cold, too strong. Claws ripped through him, tearing bone from flesh. His blood sprayed into the dark, and Mrs. Chineye drank it in, her teeth gleaming where no flame burned. The others fled, shrieking into the night, but the shadow was faster. It slithered, it stretched, it coiled around their ankles, their throats, dragging them down. The ground drank their screams. By dawn, nothing remained of the mob, only scattered torches blackened in the mud. When the sun rose, the villagers who remained saw smoke rising from the blacksmith's forge, from the chapel, from the elders' hut. One by one, the hearts of Oba village fell silent, and from the widow's cottage, she walked into the street, her children holding her hands. They laughed, bright and innocent, their eyes glowing faintly in the sunday. Behind her, no shadow followed. The shadow was her. The widow's shadow had devoured the village, and she was still hungry. Winter thawed into a sickly spring, but the village of Oba never saw its flowers bloom. Its houses stood hollow, doors swinging open to the wind, its wells black with silence. The birds did not return. Even the marsh grew quiet, as though the land itself feared to breathe. From the empty cottages, Mrs. Chineye emerged. Her children held her hands, their cheeks rosy, their laughter bright, untouched by famine or fear. But their eyes were not right, too wide, too dark. When they blinked, the shadows around them blinked too. The widow had no shadow now. She was shadow. When she stepped across the dirt road, the daylight bent away from her. She left no footprints, only a faint stain of darkness, as if the earth recoiled from her touch. The villagers had called her cursed. They had been right. They traveled beyond the marsh, into neighboring hamlets. At first, no one questioned them. A widow and her little ones, seeking shelter after bandits ravaged their home. The people took them in, fed them, offered rest. And in the morning, half the hamlet was gone. Doors stood open, floors slick with blood. No screams were heard. The dark devoured sound as it devoured flesh. Only Mrs. Chineye remained, seated at the hearth with her children. Their faces smeared crimson, their bellies full, their giggles carrying through the room. News spread, as news always does. Whispers of a woman with no shadow, of a widow whose children played in houses where no one lived, come dawn. Soldiers rode to find her, armed with steel and blessed charms. They did not return. The few who stumbled back were broken men, their eyes hollow, their tongues cut from their mouths. They carved warnings into their skin before death claimed them. The shadow walks. Mrs. Chineye no longer needed nightfall. Her body had shed its last tether to humanity. By day, her form flickered at the edges, hair drifting like smoke, hands tapering into claws. When she spoke, her voice carried two tones, the gentle warmth of a mother and the endless rasp of something that had climbed out of the grave. Her children skipped beside her, humming tunes they should not know, their shadows stretching like tendrils across walls, snaring livestock, dragging dogs into silence. The land blackened where they passed, crops withered, wells soured, fires guttered, and still they walked, village to village, town to town. The widow's shadow was no longer a story whispered in fear. It was a plague. It was a prophecy. It was a hunger without end. The land blackened wherever she walked. Villages fell silent. Towns emptied. Crops turned to dust. Mothers held their children tighter when dusk approached. Fathers prayed at every doorway, and always the whispers, the widow walks, the widow devours. When whole provinces began to wither, kings and lords banded together. An army rose, a tide of steel and fire. Priests carried relics from sanctuaries long sealed. Sorcerers broke open their forbidden tombs. All marched toward the spreading dark. Mrs. Chineye watched from the hills. Her children laughed beside her, their eyes hollow with shadows. She stroked their hair gently. Her form shifted in the daylight, half flesh, half void. A widow no longer, but something far vaster, hungrier. The shadow at her back swelled across the sky like storm clouds, blotting out the Sunday. "They come," she whispered, her voice twofold. "They think they can end me. The shadow laughed through her lips. Let them try. The army met her on a plain of scorched earth where Oba had once stood, 50,000 against one widow and two children. At the priest's call, holy fire lit the sky. At the king's command, arrows darkened the horizon. At the sorcerer's word, chains of silver lightning struck, and the widow's shadow swallowed it all. She rose, vast as night itself, her body splitting into a storm of teeth and claws, her children weaving among her like small demons of dusk. Men screamed as the dark devoured them. Fire turned cold in her grasp. Steel rusted at her touch. Prayers curdled into silence. But then, the relic, a relic carried by one priest, trembling yet resolute, the mirror of Solane, a shard of glass said to reflect not flesh but the soul. He raised it high, and for the first time, the shadow recoiled. Mrs. Chinye's eyes locked on the mirror. In its surface, she did not see her power, her triumph, her hunger. She saw her children as they truly were gaunt, hollow-eyed corpses, their mouths stuffed with soil and blood. She saw herself not as a goddess of night, but as a husk of a woman, face torn, ribs cracked, hair tangled with grave worms. The truth struck her like fire. "No!" she screamed, but her voice wavered, torn between mother and monster. Her children's laughter broke into shrieks. The priests pressed forward, the mirror gleaming brighter, reflecting her endless hunger back upon itself. The soldiers rallied, driving spears of silver light into the ground, binding her shadow. Mrs. Chineye thrashed her claws, carving trenches into the earth, her shadow tearing the sky, but the mirror held her, forced her to face what she had become. At last, she collapsed. Her form shattered, the shadow unraveling into smoke. Her children vanished with a final wail, their laughter echoing into nothing. The plane fell silent. All that remained of Mrs. Chineye was her body, small, broken, unmistakably human once more. Her eyes closed, her hands curled as if still holding her children. The soldiers buried her in an unmarked grave. The priest sealed the mirror deep in stone. The sorcerers burned what remained of Oba village. The widow's shadow was ended. And yet, when dusk falls heavy and the light grows thin, travelers sometimes swear they see a figure at the edges of the road, a woman walking with two small children, leaving no shadow behind her. Thank you for watching this story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section. What lessons did you learn from the story? Don't enjoy the story alone. Kindly share the story with your loved ones. Give the story a big thumbs up and also subscribe to this channel if you have not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way, bye.